Hi, this is Joachim from Say It in Swedish, and you're listening to Fika with Vicky in Niagara Falls, Canada.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Fika. We have two guests today joining us from rural Southwestern Ontario. Author Carolyn Wilker, who joined us in March to help with World Storytelling Day as coordinator of Baden Storytellers Guild, and author Donna Mann, whose keen interest in history has brought her both a Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal and Ontario Historical Society Award. They're launching their new book, Discover Your Story, Family History or Memoir, live on Zoom August 6th. But Discover Your Story wasn't the first book either of them has written. In fact, it isn't even the first book they've been involved in together. So let's sit back and discover more about their story, which isn't easy because it would seem that these two ladies never stop. Welcome to Fika, Carolyn.
Thank you. It's good to be here again.
Well, and I know, thank you for taking the time out because I know you're very busy right now. It's an exciting time for you and Donna, isn't it?
Absolutely, as we get ready to launch our book next week. And all the other things that are going on in our lives.
Yeah, and it's canning season.
Canning season. Pickled beets yesterday and more this afternoon.
Yes. There can never be too many pickled beets as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
So. We'll start off with a little introduction. So you have written children's books, and as you were once a preschool teacher, that's right up your line, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then you've written Once Upon a Sandbox, which is a collection of prose and poetry about life on the family farm, and a book of short stories, Piece by Piece, that also follows some of your experience as well as other things. Now, would you consider these memoirs, or what would you call them?
The Once Upon a Sandbox is largely memoir. There are other pieces in it, like essays, things that I needed to explore. However, most of that is memoir. It's actually, some of it's family history. That one's a mix. Whereas Piece by Piece is a bit more inspirational, but it is my experience. So some of them are more memoir pieces, if you can understand that. What makes memoir different from family history? Family history, you're writing about people who have gone before, usually.
Right.
That you're not the center of. You're putting those pieces together of someone else's life to tell a story. Whereas in memoir, you're sitting in the middle of all these people and you're writing about your perspective on what's going on around you. No one is separate from anyone else unless they live on a remote island, and then they still have some history. So they're writing from their own perspective, how they feel about things around them.
So family history is facts that you have learned about the family past.
Yes.
And memoirs are more personal and your description of the life around you.
Yes.
So now these are both anthologies, short stories, which are very hip right now. And I encourage people to check them out because they're perfect for a busy person, because you can sit and read one story and be complete till your next break, right?
Right.
So how important, now you were just telling me, as we were checking the sound out, that you, which is not uncommon, you didn't start writing until you were in your 60s, right?
50s,
right. Okay.
That's okay.
And this is, was this like just to share these things and your thoughts? Was that sort of like an inner journey for you? How did this come about being what you like to write about?
It started with educating other people about the effects of fragrance on humans.
Right.
There's man-made and there's natural smelling things. The man-made ones are the ones with the chemicals in, and they cause problems for people. It's not a preference where you see somebody else or smell somebody else's fragrance, perfume, or scent that they put in their laundry. It affects people health-wise. It can affect their emotions and so on. I felt the need to educate people because that was happening to me and my daughter. And so it was time to write about it and tell other people, look, this is not personal against you. This is something that's happening because of these scent chemicals. And I went on to write after other things after that.
Right. And I hear you about that because I have allergies and it's very difficult not to sneeze and other things when you do smell those fragrances.
It started as an educational effort, and it's morphed into lots of different kinds of writing.
Yes, you have a full website, which I'll give later. Yeah. It's just like, okay, just trying to, there's so much. So it was important for you to write that because it was an important message to get across.
Yes.
But like, how important do you think it is for us, I guess first personally, to write our memoirs and family history down?
I think it's particularly important for the next generation. We don't write for ourselves. We write for someone else. A book is always for someone else. You write from your experience, but you write for someone else. So family history is for someone wanting to know, how am I like my predecessors? What part of my life is different than theirs? What part of my life might be like theirs?
Right.
A memoir, you're writing about what's happening right now around you. And somewhere in the future, it's going to be further back, but right now it's about you, where you are. And I think it can be helpful to young people who are struggling to know that other people have struggled as well. And it's okay to share how you're feeling, express yourself, particularly when there have been times when people haven't been given permission to share.
Right, they finally find their voice.
Maybe particularly women.
Mm-hmm. I would say particularly women.
Mm-hmm.
And it's healing.
It is.
And also you're so busy in life that you don't actually, I think, sometimes feel the things when they happen on that day. But when you sit back at the end of all of that busyness, things start coming back to you, right?
That's true. There's also the fact that sometimes you need to process. Quite often, if there's trauma, you need to process it before you can write about it.
Right.
For example, this COVID time, I can see that there will be stories coming from it, but people can't write in the middle of it as accurately as they will later, because they won't see the outcome of it.
That's right. You don't know what you're experiencing because you don't see you're in that moment. You're too into it.
If they keep a diary during that time, they can see at the end of it, oh, so this changed and this changed for the better. This didn't change, but that's okay.
Well,
and processing.
Yes, no, and it gives us a chance for other people a chance to see that that things are overcome over time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And even if it's not the happily ever after that we thought we wanted, sometimes it comes out better, or it's what we needed at the time, right?
That's right.
So, in Once Upon a Sandbox, you wrote Speaking of allergies. Okay, sorry.
Okay. Okay.
In Once Upon a Sandbox, you wrote a story entitled Whitewashing the Barn. And you talk about your fears having to get up high to do that. Now, I totally related to that. I could feel your stomach at the time and how you were feeling. And I think that's a great story for anyone who may be younger, although it's not meant for younger people per se, but to hear about how you got through. You did do it regardless. You know, farm country at that time, you didn't have much choice.
Right.
But you did persevere, and you were valiant at the end.
That's right. I must say, at one event in Kitchener, when I was doing storytelling, I had a young girl come to me who was about 12. She said, "Would this story be okay for me to read?" And I said, "Yeah, I think you could handle that." There's a lot of stories in there for younger people, even if it's written from an adult perspective mostly. There are stories in there where I was more in touch with where I was at the time. So I would say it's a mix, although John Fear at the record said he felt it was a very balanced approach to that kind of storytelling.
Well, it becomes almost a family book, right? So
Yes,
if there are
it is.
stories that the guardians, the mom and dad, think that they want to share with the kids, it would be a great opportunity for them to do that.
Right.
I kind of like those family books because everybody can curl up and enjoy, right? So when we talk about what we're putting in the books and things like that, now at Fika, we like to share recipes of something, some goodies, because that's a part of Fika.
Right.
And you shared from your own family cookbook. I love the name, More Please. A little Oliver Twist there.
It seemed what we did at family gatherings where all the good cooks had their food. Like my Aunt Ruth was known for her lemon tarts. My mom was known for her raspberry pie. Someone else was known for something else. And they brought their best recipes, their best cooking. And if we liked it, we'd often say, "I'd like more of that." And when we were having difficulty coming up with a name, I was asking for possibilities of titles from other people in that extended family, and nobody was forthcoming. And I brainstormed some, and I thought, more please.
It is, and yes, I miss. When you talk about growing up in a rural area. And I did, and church potlucks and these kind of family get-togethers. Sometimes I think I've been looking. Sometimes I think they're not as full of all these homemade goodies as they once were. Okay?
No, more women are working away from home.
Right. It's understandable.
They don't have as much time for the potluck suppers. So
it's a shame. It's a definite shame. So you sent a recipe for steamed raspberry pudding, and it's the perfect season for that. So I will put that up on the Facebook site and other places. And I just want to know, what is the best type of pot, because it didn't say, to make this in? Like, what would your suggestion be?
My mom had a big saucepan.
Okay.
We never did that one in the oven. She had a big stainless steel saucepan with a cover on it. And so once she cooked the raspberries with the thickening and then put the dough on the top, she'd cover it for a bit and let it steam. So it was done on the stove top.
So that's what I figured. So stainless steel saucepan, I have one. It's just It's just fine. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, this is important. And I
And
love even hearing how you described how your mom made it. Like, it's like you're back in that kitchen again.
Right. That was one of my favorite desserts. My dad's favorite was something called Charlotte Ruche, which was the end of the chocolate cake, usually, with some whipped cream or something. I didn't care for that, but I always loved the steamed raspberry pudding. It was my favorite.
And so, how long ago did you do this family cookbook?
In 2010, it was before Sandbox came out. I was working on Sandbox and I was also editing. And my cousins nominated me as the editor. They said, "Oh, you know what you're doing." But they helped me. They helped me gather things. But they just didn't. They felt that I would do better. But I got my cousin's wife, who's a school teacher, to help me with some of the looking over the recipes once they came in, just to make sure that all the ingredients were there.
Well, no, because if somebody makes something a lot, I mean, I've gotten recipes where there are things missing.
Right. I'll only say there's one or two of that that we kind of missed a little bit because we didn't know the recipe.
Right.
But for the most part, everything is good.
But you're there to call, right?
Yes. Well,
so
for some of them.
For some of them. So, I mean, what a great way to bring the family together, though.
It was a great experience. We had the hardest time getting pictures and maybe even harder getting the stories that went with the recipes. Because I wanted this collection to be something that people could take away and say, "Oh, Grandma Ardina made this. This was her best recipe. The tea biscuit recipe was her best, tops. And Lila's raspberry pie and Vitamase, baked beans, we put our best into it." And then we had to look into copyright too, because there's a lot of cookbooks that get put together that they just borrow recipes here and there. But you want to make sure that you're not defying copyright.
No, I've found that even with like sharing the recipes, you kind of want to know where they originally came from.
This one is a family recipe, the one I shared. So it's perfectly fine.
Well, I trusted you completely, Carolyn.
What we did, we went through them and I asked each person who sent a recipe, whether it was an old family recipe or whether it was one from a cookbook, and if so, where it came from. I was inspired by a particular recipe. And then you can't copyright the list of ingredients, but you can put a copyright on the way you express yourself.
Oh, really?
The way you describe the actions of putting that recipe together. That's where the copyright comes in. And if you change more than 3 ingredients, you change it substantially, you can call it your own recipe.
Okay, so you're going to want to listen back to this later on, people, because this is important stuff. Because I think we've all thought about doing something like this, and it's a great way to give little memories of everybody and favorite aunts and grandparents and that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yes.
Yes, and you brought us the information. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Your experiences have been very helpful.
Editing helps.
So aside from all your writing, which we'll probably get back to because, I mean, this thing moves organically, but we want to, let people know why you and Donna are the people to write this book, right?
Right.
So you've also spent a lot of years training and speaking with Toastmasters.
Yes.
I know we did this on the last show, but just in case people weren't listening, do you just want to give us a little tiny bit about what Toastmasters is, if people aren't aware?
Toastmasters is an organization dedicated to learning leadership and communication skills. And many people who go there want to do better in their communications at work. They might want to speak professionally, but that's not what most people go for. They might want to learn some leadership abilities, develop them. And that's a perfect place for developing leadership as well. It's an international organization, started in the 40s, I believe, in California, but it's worldwide. There's clubs all over the world.
And I think it would help with confidence as well, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. It's made the difference for me. My first speech, I stood there, my hands shook, my paper shook, my knees shook, and my voice trembled.
Aww.
I can now speak without that happening. There might be some nerves, there might be some butterflies yet, but I've learned to manage them better.
And no one sees them. They're not
right.
They're not shaking.
Right.
So how long have you been with Toastmasters?
Since 2004.
Right. So I think it's safe to say that Carolyn has a lot of experience with Toastmasters and public speaking now. And one of the things, oh, by the way, you can rent Carolyn for various things.
For groups.
And we'll get to that information later. But one of the topics you actually speak on is writing memoirs.
I actually have taught writing memoirs. I haven't spoken as much about that.
Oh, okay. So you've taught workshops
at the community center. I've actually taught some of both, but in working on this book together, we decided to separate, and I focus on memoirs and Donna on the family history.
Okay, I was wondering if that's what you did because yes. She's a huge history. Not that you're not, but I mean, it's her thing.
She's done it for a longer time. Mm-hmm. I can say that because she's got more experience in delving into the generations that have come to Canada and what they've done since then. She's come at it from a different angle.
Right.
And I like the social history of people about what makes my grandparents the people they were. And that's a bit of cross-pollination. The story I write about my grandmother in Sandbox is trying to discover how much like she is that my interests cross with hers.
Because that's important.
I was 12 when she died, so I didn't have as much time with her as I did with my other grandmother. But I would think, and I do believe that I'm more like that grandmother than my mom's mother, because we had similar interests. She liked to sew, and she was creative in her home. She just did a lot of creative things. Both grandmothers did, but I just felt a little bit more kinship with my dad's mom.
And so you were able to explore that through the story.
Yes, that's right. And in one of the snippets in Discover Your Story, I used a piece of that idea and my Aunt Edith was able to help me piece some things together and give me a bit more information.
So it is kind of timely and important to get these stories from people while they're here.
Absolutely.
Because we lose so much.
All my father's family have died. Mm-hmm. So there's nobody left to ask.
Right.
And interestingly enough, my Aunt Edith was she was the oldest, but the last one to go.
So, yeah.
I was able to ask her some questions before that book was published, before Sandbox was published.
So your interest in that also allowed you to spend some time with her.
Exactly.
Spend time with her and get that story. And I understand what you're saying because I have a sister who does the family tree, and she's so good at it. But when I just want to hear the stories as she goes along.
That's me. That's exactly where I sit. There's enough people who've done the genealogy. I don't need to do that. And I don't want to do that part. I like the stories to uncover who that person was. For example, my great uncle Edward, though he was extremely handicapped from the age of 16 from polio, he was such an interesting character. And I want to enliven his character a little bit more. And I did that in one of my stories in Sandbox. And that's more of a family story. But that's bringing him to life.
So do you have any copies of Sandbox lying around that should I go for a drive one day and end up at your door?
Yes, yes.
For pickled beans?
I do. Okay. And yeah.
Okay. All right. This is all about me, people, okay, and what I can get. So. She just sold Sandbox to me, and you can find it on her website, which we will give you the link to shortly.
And people can order from me as well.
Yes. But I figure I'll just make it all one trip. Now, okay, back your, I'm trying to think of dates here. All right, so there's all of these things that come in to play that you're not just writing a story. It becomes an actual part of your life, the research, the talking to people, all of these things.
Yes.
And a happy part of your life, right?
Yes. And I love to write poetry as well.
And yeah, there's some poetry in the Sandbox.
There's poetry. The Traveling Light is a collection of Sandbox poetry that I've written over the years.
Well, I'm going through a really big poetry phase because the way words are turned and used in poetry is the words almost embrace you with the feelings, right? It's a little different than reading like the longer dialogue. So
poetry can be used also to express deep emotion, and I often use that in memoir pieces.
So there you go. You can sort of take breaks between and throw some of your own poetry in, and that's a nice touch.
One of the pieces I wrote a while back was regarded when my youngest daughter was leaving home and how hard it was to let her go. I think the poem is no more than 53 words, but it explores that deep feeling of letting the last one go.
And that's a big thing.
And how you let them go off on their own, like a kite. You're letting the kite fly free. And when you do that, you keep their love.
Right. And well, that's such a nice analogy, a nice way of putting it. And do you find that when you write the poems that it sort of gives you that release that you need emotionally?
It can initially. Later on, as I refine the poem, I wanted to speak to my readers as well. I wanted to mean something to them.
Right. Something more universal.
Right.
And then just...
So when you write from your own experience, but you write for the reader or the listener, depending on how you present. If you're a speaker, you write for their ear. If you're writing, you write for them to take in as they read.
That makes perfect sense.
So you don't just write about your trials, but you write about what you've learned from them. For example, my story about Barb, Piece by Piece, I struggled with her not being healed. because I prayed for her and prayed for her. And I did want her to get better.
Right.
But in the end, we had to let her go. And then I realized that my faithfulness was in praying for her, uplifting her, and supporting her family.
And I was going to talk about this with Donna,
Yes.
because we're splitting you up,
Right.
because she has a lot
Mm-hmm.
on the grief thing.
Yes.
But you did work on a book with her, and others,
Right.
about, which was also an analogy about grief,
Yes.
and is that what you wrote about in that book?
In that book, I wrote about my father being at his bedside when he was in hospice, about a friend. There's several poems about my friend and another friend. So there's some very personal examples of going through grief. The story with Barb I saved that for Piece by Piece with
Okay.
permission from the family.
Okay.
Always ask permission if you're telling
Oh,
someone
yes,
else's story.
definitely. Yes, because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just you do. Like for me, sharing someone's story is like the the most the most responsible, like holds a great deal of responsibility.
It
And
does.
and you need to be very respectful because
Mm-hmm.
it's their story, right?
Exactly. If you've read a story that someone else figures largely and you ask permission to
And
share
if you
that
did
story.
that, there would be a lot less gossiping in the world.
No, that's another way of looking at it.
Just the stories. So don't gossip, put it on paper, and then ask permission.
To share it in public. You can write it in your own journal.
Right. No, exactly.
If you're
Journals
going to
are
share it in public.
amazing.
Yeah.
They're just one of the most helpful things in life, I think. So you've been telling us some great stories here, and which brings us to yet in the introduction. I say that these ladies never stop, but yet another activity in your life, which we talked about last time because it was World Storytelling Day. But you are with the Baden Storytellers Guild, and so that sort of mixes with the Toastmaster because you need confidence to get up there and tell that story, right?
Exactly. I started with Toastmasters and moved to storytelling as well, added it in.
And so I read that you like to tell folk tales, but you also like to tell some personal tales there as well.
Yes. I've told the story about, actually I used whitewashing the barn in a contest speech, but I've told the story about going to the bush in the spring. And that's one of my favorite ones to tell because my father's at the center of it.
And yes, and now you have me thinking about walking out to the bush, as we used to call it,
Right.
the first time in the spring, and just like the first time you see a little flower or something
Right.
coming up.
He taught us the names of plants, the names of trees, which plants to avoid, which plants we could pick, which ones we dare not pick, like trilliums.
I was going to say, don't touch the trilliums.
Right. We learned that very young.
Well, no, it's amazing the things that you learn and you don't even remember learning them. They're just such a part of the life, right?
Yes.
It's different, and it touches a lot of things about nature, and you spend more time together, I think. Or maybe that was just the times.
I think it was the time because we were there all on 150 acres in that piece of property. We spent a lot of time together. Because Dad was a farmer, he was there for breakfast, lunch, and supper. So we got to spend a lot of time with him, unlike if he had been working evening shift, for example, or
Right.
night shift and me sleeping in the daytime. I can understand how people don't have the same amount of time with their
Oh
phone.
yeah, no, it's completely understandable. It's a lot of things have changed. Some for the better. Some, like, if you didn't grow up on the farm, you wouldn't have had to whitewash that barn.
Exactly.
so there's positives and negatives to anything. But as you grow older and you look back, you do sort of sigh. I mean, regardless of what our lives are, right? Because there's those comforting things.
Mom asked me in her later years after her dad died, she said, "Did we really whitewash the barn?" I said, "We did." Yeah. There's so many things go by in your life that some things you kind of let go or you forget about, or they're not top of mind anymore.
Well, no, because there's a lot that goes on. You have families, you go to school, you work, like there's just a whole lot. But I do find that as I'm getting older, the little things start coming back.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then you're like, did I see that in a movie or was that me?
Right. And I think now with when we were all restricted to less activity during the early months of COVID, I think a lot of people might have gotten in tune more with the things that really mattered, communication with their family, making use of what they already have rather than going out and shopping.
Yeah, no.
I mean, there's things you need, but
well, and
you make do with a little less.
Yeah, there is it just you just do. If you're away from town, if you're on an island, if you whatever, you learn that you can't just run into the store all the time, right?
Right, exactly.
So you get more creative just naturally, and you reuse things because you can, and so I think it's a good thing in that way, that it did maybe make some people think a little differently about those things. And finally, because I'm going to have time for Donna too.
Okay.
Finally, but you can always come back a third time, Carolyn.
Okay. Okay. Next book.
Next book. I was going to ask you what was next. I was afraid to, because there's always a next. But while you're doing all of these things, you were also running a freelance editing, I'm going to say company, but service. That's good, right?
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
I edit for other authors who are looking towards publishing their own work.
Right.
Sometimes they want to submit it to a traditional publisher, but quite often it's that they want to self-publish and they want their work to look professional.
It's important for the reader. I always consider it like house cleaning. You just want to make it comfortable for the reader, right?
Exactly. It is for the reader, so you want them to not be distracted by things that could be fixed up. You want them to enjoy the reading, which you don't enjoy if there's a lot of things that trip you up. The way words are used, the way grammar is not used, the way spelling might be ignored, because not everybody has all of those things under control. So I help them to look their best.
Right, because it's very difficult to edit your own work.
Absolutely.
Because you see what you think you wrote. And also, I'm like, there's always going to be a typo or something, even in published work.
Absolutely.
There is. But if I have to go over the same sentence 3 times to figure out what it is saying, you lose me. Like,
right.
You lose anyone, because you want to sit there and be comfortable and enjoy the read, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly.
So editing is always a good idea. And you can get more information about that on Carolyn's link. And one more thing before we go to that link, where will we be able to find this book when it does come out, Carolyn?
We will have our website. Donna has the link. I don't have it handy. We have a link, our website, and we plan to put it up in a couple of places. We haven't totally determined where all those places will be. But
okay, well, when I get those things, and the book is, once again, the launch is on the 6th next week, I'll have more information where you can find that at the end of the show. Yeah.
By that time we will know.
Yeah, and then I will share that there, because I think it's really important that we get a lot of different voices out there, and if I can help someone do that, that's what I'm here for.
All right.
So, finally, the link we've been promising. Donna, do you want to give it? Or do you want me to? It's Carolyn Wilker.
Yes.
All together, small letters. I'm going to put that up on the page as well. .ca. So Carolyn Wilker, WILKER .ca. And when you get to it, it will say fine tune editing.
Correct.
And it's
there are many pages.
yeah, no, but it's very impressive. I like a website that I can just go on, click for what I want and I need. So at the top is very there's books, and then there's storytelling and speaking, and there's editing. So everything has its own little category that you can go to and find. And
my newsletter.
And your newsletter, because you needed one more thing to do. What? And she still can.
Yes.
So yeah, no, that was fantastic. You've got me very interested, and we still have Donna left to inspire us to tune in next Thursday. So thanks for coming by again, Donna. And I know you still have a lot more preparing to do, so I'll let you go. And for the rest of you, just stay where you are, because we will be talking to Donna shortly. Okay, thank you. back, everyone, and a special welcome to author Donna Mann, the other half of the Discover Your Story Family History or Memoir Partnership. Hi, Donna. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Vicky. It's nice to be here.
Now, you have so much going on, and I want to include all of it because it's all very inspiring, but I think we'll start with a little bit of your background since we're talking about history. Now, you grew up on a farm, and your work has been in pastoral ministry in a rural area. I grew up in such an area and such a church, and I remember, though that was many years ago and things have probably changed, but I remember it was almost like growing up in history. There were multi-generational homes that had been in the families for generations. Everybody cooked and canned and gardened and farmed and did their activities much the way they had for hundreds of years with a little, modern improvements. And the cemeteries had people you knew or knew of or knew the relatives of in the churchyards and sometimes on the people's own property. Do you think growing up in such a way inspired your interest in history?
I'm sure it has. I can remember thinking when I went with my parents to farm or to the church at the other end of the concession, or even Saturday night, come to town to watch people walk by. But it was like one big family, and it was, in fact, we often called part of our family aunt and uncle, and you weren't just sure who actually was the real family until you got a little older, because everybody brought you up on their knee or asked some questions that were important to you, and so it's a very nice feeling to be part of a larger family in a farming community.
Yes, you made me somewhat nostalgic all week, Donna. with it's that time of year when you would be out and it's just been lovely. Thank you for that. So you have this interest in history and historical fiction, and you're thinking about writing, but you have like this whole life going on, and very, very busy life. You're still very, very busy. So you do take an hour or so whenever you can and start to write. And one of the first things you did, was it one of the first things, the Agnes MacPhail series?
Well, I retired, and then I had time to do what I could never do, of course, when I was working. So I was at a church service, in a rural church, and this was not around here or even in this county. And the man that was telling the story to the children was using some of the biblical names of women. And then he said, and of course, Agnes MacPhail, you will know about her from school. And a little child, a boy I think it was, said, "Who's she?" So I went home and I thought, the kids don't know about her. Or the kids are not learning. Are the kids learning about her? That was a question in my mind. So in that same week, I was in the local library, and I met a bunch of the kids that I knew, and I said, "So what are you guys all up to?" And one of them said, "We're writing about all the famous people in Canada." And so, I said, "Emily Carr, yes." And I went through half a dozen names, and then I said, "Donna Mann," and they all laughed. But then I said, "Agnes MacPhail," and it was silence. And so I said, now I see why. You have a wise teacher, because your teacher's going to ask you to look up all these famous people, and you're going to have a fresh new learning about Agnes McPhail. So a couple of weeks later, I went and met with one of the teachers in that school. And she was, I had the first chapter of the first book. So I gave it to her, and she liked it. And so she said, do you have any more? And I said, yes, I have lots of chapters. And I said, would you like to read this to your grade 5 students? And she said she'd love to do that. So that's actually, it was a school that got me going and got me excited and affirmed, and the idea that yes, we have to present things to these children for them to learn and connect to. So there was great confirmation in that whole procedure, and that was my goal, to write something that children, young adults, could learn about Agnes McPhail. So there were 3 books: Aggie's Storms, and Aggie's Dream, and Aggie's Voice.
Well, I have to tell you, Donna, that whether I learned in school or not, which was a long time ago, I had to look her up again when I saw the books. So you are maybe for the first time. I don't know. I have no memory. So you are still helping people to know about Aggie. And in case there's anybody out there like me who doesn't know about Aggie, do you want to just take a second and give, the fast version?
Well, she was a farm girl. Her father was an auctioneer, and her father, I think she always said she got her wit from her father and the way he would, talk with the people who were bidding, and she was a great speaker. She had a deep voice, and she was very appealing to the people. And so she won her nomination in Durham, Ontario, and it was not very much, like maybe a month or so, I'm just not sure that time frame, that she began to move into her politics in a very real way. And she stuck up, she took the side of people that didn't have a voice. And we know there are lots of people even in today's world that don't speak out or can't speak out or don't have the opportunity to speak out. And if Agnes was here, she'd be making that opportunity happen. And you wouldn't hardly know it was being done, because it would be gentle and caring, and the person would be presented with the opportunity and probably help to do it, to accept it. So yes, she was. She was. Well, what can I say? Chatelaine wrote a big long article about her when she was 10 years old, and the title of it was "Aggie Was a Terror." So when I wrote that first book, Agnes was 10 years old. So
she's a terror in the first book.
Yeah, she was a terror right off. And I had one review, that said I didn't have a good enough character arc. And I thought, well, I'm following history. She started off with a bang, and she ended up in that book with the same bang.
Yeah, no, you can't. When you're writing history, factually, there's not much you can do about the arc of the character, is there?
Well, not if you're writing according to history and you're representing. Your words are representing history, and they can't make something happen just to please a reader who likes something to start off really weak, and then the circumstances and situations actually strengthen that person to make that person, come out at the end of the book in a way that the reader is pleased, because Aggie just started out with a bang and she ended up with a bang.
Well, and I was going to say, and what a great role model for girls to not start off weak, to have the strength. I mean, we need more of those stories, and she sounds like she'd be a great role model.
She was. And she was
girls.
A teacher. She was a teacher, so she knew how that. She knew what the kids needed. I'll just read you 2 paragraphs. Can I?
Yes, you can do whatever you want, Donna.
from chapter 1. It's just called Marbles and Manners, and it starts out, which is really a good phrase for me to think about Agnes MacPhail. She starts out, "That's not fair, Will. It's my turn." 10-year-old Aggie said she watched her friend Will's marble roll slowly into the circle. "Don't go changing the rules. You always do that." "Do what?" Will asked. "You know what, Will. We're going to play this game right from now on. We've got rules, so let's use them." So right off the bat, she's not settling for anything less than what is fair. And that's where that book starts.
I like her. Now,
that's not fair.
Now, so you just wrote this book to help out and get Aggie's name out there. But it ended up something very exciting happened to you because of that book. Can you tell us about that?
Well, it was the 3 books together that put her public school life in book 1, her secondary school life in book 2, and her normal school life in book 3. And so the research that had to go into those years, there was lots written once she got into politics.
Right.
But those early years of finding her way from one school to another school, there wasn't much written down to follow. So I had to talk to a lot of people and make a lot of trips to looked at a lot of people's boxes that they knew they had a letter in there from Maggie, and we'll find it. And so after you dig it for away an hour, well, there it is. So there was a lot of work it went into that, and so my name was put forth for the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee, and I was accepted, and I got an email saying to be at Meaford at the base there, the military base there.
Right.
And I would be presented with this along with other people who were honored as well. So that's what happened there. I love the little medal, but I can't wear it everywhere. I can only wear it at certain functions. I wore it when I went to Windsor Castle in England. I wore it all day that day.
Well, if you're going to wear it, that's the place to wear it.
I guess so.
Well, congratulations on that and for all that hard work. And yeah, that's just downright cool. That is a cool thing. So you continued writing about, you do like to write about women in history, right?
I do. I really do. I think that women's stories have not been told enough. And over the years, I look back at my grandmothers, and I look back at my mother, just a brilliant woman that took grade 13 in an era where people would wonder why. And she had subjects like botany and zoology and I look through those books and I am just amazed at her intelligence, at her level of intelligence. But she came back to the farm after she didn't go on to university. I mean, where could she go? You know, there were not the opportunities for women in say 1920. There just weren't those opportunities. So I feel sorry about that. I feel sad about that. But she was a kind of mom that she taught us as much as she could, for three of the family, and she taught Sunday school, and
But that was the life that she knew, and I'm sure she was quite happy in it.
Well, I think she could have stretched. She would be comfortable. She loved to learn.
Yes.
And she expected her family to love to learn too. So we didn't catch on to that until we were older. My sister maybe did. I can't speak for my family, for my siblings, but I don't think I did. I can speak for myself.
So then you wrote, in lieu of the women, you wrote a rare find, which is the story of a Canadian prairie midwife, and and midwives are all the rage now with Call the Midwife, and I enjoyed the birthing house. So tell me more about this book.
Well, this book was a joy to research and to put together. And I'll tell you how that started. I was doing some visiting, and I was in this person's house, and she was telling me, because I was new in that little community, she was telling me about all the things that were important to her. And she started talking to me about the midwife, Ethel. And I was just amazed at the stories of this midwife going out in snowstorms and floods, and walking and riding in a wagon, and to get to these mums in time to deliver their baby. And I said to this woman at the kitchen table, I said, have you ever thought of writing these stories down? And she knew I was busy, and she kind of grinned at me, and she said, that's a job for you in your spare time. So I came home to Guelph, to Washington County from out west. That was out west. And I phoned the midwife's son and said, I would like to write about your mother. And he was very kind and sent me a lot of things, a lot of, just little tidbits here and there of dates and places. Nothing that I could really start off and write the first paragraph. But I got a feel of a son who appreciated and loved his mother. And I got a feel of the community in which she was in. So I started. It was 25 years of research, and I would leave it for a year or more at a time, because I'd write to England for certificates, and you'd have to wait forever for a letter back, or if they were still looking for it. So it took a long time. I never gave up on it, and I love that little book, and it still sells, and it's a great story of perseverance and poverty and all of that came through that era, pre-war era.
So you said it takes 25 years to research that book, and you've been spending like 40 years working on your own family tree. So this has to be a passion to keep you going, right?
Yeah, it is. It's I had an uncle who who knew an important part of my mother's family, and this person had gone to England and had done some very significant groundwork, and so I caught the fever. I got a box full of files, and I looked through them, and I thought, oh, I can work on this. I can put some names in those boxes, those empty frames, and so I just interested in that, and whenever I hear of a new baby being born, I write it down, even though it's not in the right place at the right time, but it's written down, it's posted, and I get back to it to put it on the tree, and yeah, that's how it just happens, subtly, quietly, and I hope whoever I have to pass it on to will have the same kind of fever. That's a good kind of fever. It's one that never lets you go, but it's good.
Well, and it's a fever that it doesn't mean just sending letters, just researching, through these types of things. You're out there, like you've gone to cemeteries in Nova Scotia and so many other provinces, right?
Yes, I have. Yeah. Yes, that is the way that's a place where you get the correct spelling most places. Some family trees, like the old writing, sometimes it's just hard to pick up what the letters are from those old marriage certificates and death certificates, and the old looks like a C, or, you just have to, you can't guess at some of this, so you go into a cemetery and taking a picture now with a cell phone. It's so nice. I've got more tombstones on my on my cell phone. But that's where you can bring it home, the right date of birth, the right date of death, and look around the cemetery when you're there and see who else has the same name, and get your notebook out.
And it really is not just about your family tree when you're there, because I know with a sister into family trees and a husband who's into history, and I really am too, but you look around and you will see years where so many children were lost, and that there's a sickness that went through, and then next thing you know, you're researching that.
Yes, that's right. Yes, it's like stepping stones. And when you're missing a stepping stone, the stretch is too large. There's always some information in between that will take you to that next step. And I think it's very important to realize that you've never got it all together. There's always a corner, there's always a crease that needs unfolding a bit. You have to do this for the right reason. Family trees can't be done, completed, worked on just to do it. It's more than just numbers and names, and it's a passion for the human journey, passion for the heart of why people work so hard in their area. What do they see as important? Those kinds of questions. And there's no room to tell a story. There's no room to get back at somebody. There's absolutely no room for anything except honesty.
Facts.
Sorry?
Facts. Like
facts?
Yes.
Yes, and even goes beyond facts, so sometimes it's reading between the lines about pain and personal difficulties that you're not going to spell out. That's their story to tell. You know what I mean? It's not my story to tell about them. So, can I read you just a portion of what I think is a good explanation of an old gentleman?
Once again, Donna, you can do whatever you want.
One cannot guess at details or embellish them to make content more attractive to the reader. If you believe someone's life is worth celebrating and sharing, and others will learn from it, tell it as it is. If the information is not accessible, you will have to wait until you find the facts. All lives are valuable, and the picture you paint in words reflects them. He lived alone in a small town, close to Main Street, in an ordinary house that had served 3 generations. He dressed without flair, always neat and shaven in a tidy appearance. He never hurried anywhere, just shuffled along the street as if time was not significant. Greetings like, "Nice day we're having," or "Keeping out of trouble," or "Traffic is heavy today," never demanded a response. He didn't ask for much, just walked to the grocery store every other day and carried 2 bags home. The town loved him. There is no need to embellish, exaggerate, or fabricate. He was a pleasant, quiet man. Like an unfolded map, he opened an incredible story and laid it in front of the interviewer through the way he lived his life.
Now, see, I think that's beautiful because we don't see the greatness in that kind of existence, but it really is great.
Yeah, he would be the kind of gentleman that would have time for you.
Mm-hmm.
And appreciate a relationship.
Yes. Yeah. The important stuff that we don't always write about. Now, I guess while we were on cemeteries, you also won an award from the Ontario Historical Society, and I need the details of this because I don't have any yet, for your interest in a pioneer's cemetery.
Yes, I have. I like to walk the old pioneer cemeteries, and there are a few of them that have just been forgotten, and sometimes the one that I was particularly interested in was sort of on a side road that was not traveled, and so it was easy to forget about something like that. Nobody had been buried for a number of years. There wasn't anyone buried for quite a while, so there wasn't the traffic by or to or from. So I became interested in that, and I worked solo for a number of years, and then brought some interested people on board with me. And so we had a dedication day, and it was wonderful. Families came from a long distance and short distance and around the concession, and it was really emotional too. They were people from Scotland that had come over, and they had settled in that township. So we ended up with a bagpipe, an Amazing Grace, and man, we were all in tears. So it was a wonderful day to remember and to appreciate our forefathers and foremothers.
Well, first of all, it's been my experience that bagpipes and Amazing Grace always ends in tears.
Especially with bagpipes.
But also, I mean, it is the feeling of connectedness to those who came before, and people don't people say graveyards not me, but they really are beautiful places, peaceful, and some of the art on the memorials is amazing.
It is. It is. And so I've got some from that whole experience. That was a long time too. I worked in that situation for a long, long time, years, and so it was well worth it. I don't resent any time spent, because of every hour, every day, every memory we uncovered, every fact we learned is like holy ground.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you, so that people know this interest, this passion in history and family history and getting things right and putting it down, it has brought you like a lot of things over the years. A lot of people you've met, you've said, and like, can you imagine your life without doing these things?
I couldn't. No, I couldn't imagine what else I would love as much.
Thank you, Donna. Technology was not my friend this week, to say the least, and both of my guests were patient and understanding. I couldn't be more grateful. But I did want to add more to Donna's segment because we were cut short. She, like Carolyn, has a fantastic website. You can find it at donnamann.org. So that's all small letters, DONNAMANN.org. And I will be posting it on the Fika with Vicky Facebook page as well. There you will find information about the Agnes MacPhail series and a rare find, but you'll also discover children's stories. If you click on meadowfarm.homestead.com, there will be free PDFs and audios for tales such as 6 Wishes for Willow, The Attic Door, and many more. I also want to mention her website has several works on grief, including Good Grief People, which Carolyn Wilker was also involved in. Also, she has a blog called Grieve and Grow that she updates regularly. Oh, and she has also shared a family recipe for marmalade, which I think would be fantastic on tea biscuits for Fika. So, I'll make sure you can find that as well. Carolyn and Donna have a lot of experience to share on writing family histories and memoirs. And if you've been inspired to write them too, check out their live Facebook page launch on Zoom. It's on August 6th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you put book launch for Discover Your Book in the Facebook search, it will pop up with all the things you need to know. And of course, I'll be posting that. But remember, as our experts today remind us, sharing someone's story is a big responsibility. So get permission, check your facts, be aware of your emotions, be sensitive of others, and do it with kindness, because you never know who will be sharing your story. I'd like to thank Carolyn and Donna again. They're welcome back to visit at any time. And for the rest of you lovely listeners, thank you. Until our next Fika, may your coffee be hot and your stories sweet, full of discovery.